I'm gonna talk a little bit about Sandhills and what we do here to start. And then I'm gonna kind of move my way through some of the things that we do with economic forecasting. And then also I'd like to share some strategies and some things that I put into place right about mid-March this year and how quickly we did it. And then in the end, I'm gonna talk to you about our global expansion. I am just real briefly about myself. I'm a University of Nebraska graduate. When I came out here in 1995, I knew nothing about the construction equipment industry or the truck industry. I knew quite a bit about farms and farm equipment because I grew up with my grandparents' farm in Scribner, Nebraska. But to find out that I would end up traveling around the world and working very hard at expanding this Midwest company's global outreach was far from my mind in 1995. So I'll take a bit on that journey today. See if this works. That didn't work, so I'll go like that. There we go. Very simple concept of what we do on the surface. Okay, everything that we do here is really based in whether it's a farmer looking to buy a John Deere ag tractor, whether it's a contractor or a mine looking to buy a Caterpillar dozer, or any kind of company that has transportation needs to buy trucks. Very similar to the used car market, cars.com, Auto Trader, similar idea, except the equipment is much, much bigger. And it is very easy to make not just a $10,000 mistake, but maybe a $25,000 or $50,000 mistake. Now, where I come from, that's a lot of money. And I recognized early on when speaking with customers that they were depending on certain data that we were bringing to the table long before we were really this strong on the digital side. And then we're also in the aircraft market. And of course, now Jim's talking about restaurants. You can tell that the owners have really diversified and brought many things. But these are the four core markets, and I just like to get that simple concept down. What we do is, if you're a dealer who's selling a piece of this equipment, you advertise that in our magazines and on our websites. We work very hard at distributing our websites and our magazines to people that buy this sort of thing. And as you can imagine, one person, one deal that gets done can mean 10 years worth of advertising with us. So that is the foundation of what we do. Is there any questions on that? And I would really encourage everyone today, if you have questions as we go, please just ask. Don't wait until the end, because I'll get off track a little bit, and it's better we stay on that same concept. But that's the base of what we do. This is a picture of the very first magazine that the owners published. It was Machinery Trader. So our foundation came in the construction equipment market. And you can see there's no pictures on that newspaper right there. And that would become one of our, in the 1990s, talking about the four color process and having actual color pictures in our magazine, that was our big claim to fame, and that would evolve on more. But 1978, we published the first edition. 20,000 copies were sent out. That magazine has been printed every week since 1978. So really kind of a cool thing to look at. Sometimes I'm able to bring it with me. I didn't have it today. The Machinery Trader manager wouldn't part ways with it, but it's kind of fun to show how different it looked back then. Now you see today, and again, these are just a part of the products we have, but I like to use those core three. The Machinery Trader market, it's a print magazine and trade website. Truck paper for trucks, same idea. Tractor House, same idea, except for the ag market. In the mid-2000s, we started to get very active in online auctions, and I'm not going to go too in-depth into our online auction product, other than to tell you that I was here when it started. And it was not easy to get off the ground. But wow, when it got off the ground, it just took off. And I kind of laugh as I hear people battling and working to develop it today, and I go, you should have been here when we only had 4 or 5 machines on there. And convincing the world that this was going to work, because it really has changed the marketplace. And I myself, about 5 or 6 times a year, I'm asked by some Wall Street company to give a day of my time. I never give it. It's not something we do. But it wasn't until we got in the online auction side that sort of thing happened. And that's when I knew, even just fundamentally as a person, that we were really impacting global markets. So you got your print publications. I also like to talk a little bit about the global expansion part of it. So you see the market book concept. As we moved into some of these markets, Canada is a great example of this, and it's one of the forefronts I'm working on today to develop the Canadian market. We actually combined all three markets into one magazine and one website. So it's a mix of construction, trucks, and ag equipment in one place. We do that concept in Canada, we do it in Latin America, we do it in South Africa, and we also do it in New Zealand right now. Eventually, you know, my goal for Canada is that we'll eventually break that out, and there'll be enough market share in each of those markets to have its own unique identity. And that's come with its own challenges and search engines and things of that nature, because the search engines can't figure out if we're a market book or machinery trader or market book or tractor house. And what we end up being is 1 and 2, and we're competing with ourselves. So some of the little challenges on that, but still, I think an easy concept to grasp. In 1995, when I came here, my first job was to travel to these auctions and just track what things were selling for. And we sold that data. I didn't really know what the internet was at that time. It was something I was hearing about, but it was definitely a new concept. The owner of the company, the founder, Tom Peet, he had invented a system that was taking advantage of internet technology. And we basically sold this information through, I mean, today it seems like, you know, normal concept, but back then it was not. We sold this information where we literally had to lease a computer and a modem. That modem had one dedicated line that tied into a modem at our company. Every 20 minutes, it downloaded a packet of this information, and it was auction results. That was half of it. The other half was for sale listings. Now again, today seems quite normal. Back then, whiz-bang technology. In fact, we had a whole room dedicated for it in the administration building, and that area seemed like NASA to me. But I got the opportunity to go and work with that product about 1996. And my job then was traveling around the country to work with used equipment managers and showing them how to use this technology. And they, in turn, were teaching me what they needed to know about this technology, what they needed to see. And the value of that really superseded anything I'd ever experienced before. From 1996 to 1999, I learned everything I needed to know, and so did my colleagues in that small group. That put us way ahead of the curve. And by the time we started rolling out the trade websites in 1998, 1999, none of our competition was doing this. And we had serious competitors in every one of these markets, but because we were the first and way ahead of the curve, we just took off like a rocket ship at that point. And that's when some of these extra buildings start popping up around here, because we needed all of these types of people on the IT side we never had before. And it just went like rocket fire. But along the way, we were trying to decide how much longer are we going to need to be printing these magazines. I had 2002, 2003, 2004. I was thinking by now we would be out of it. We started testing that a little bit. And so we started pulling back a little bit on that print distribution. And what we found is when we had print distribution up here and our web traffic was up here, when we moved our print distribution down, guess what happened to our web traffic? It went down. Okay, so you see that happen, you take a step back, go, not yet. Not time to do this just yet. And around that time, the online auction product rolled out, Auction Time, and Auction Time had one thing on it that none of the other trade pubs had. It had this code on a picture, but it was a lot number, okay? So if you go to an auction, you're gonna bid on something, there's a lot number on it. The only place you could find that lot number was in our print magazine. And sure enough, one day, one of the IT guys pointed out, hey, there's a lot of people typing in that code. And the only way they can see that is in print. Something's going on here. And so we went ahead and tied this little quick find code here to the print media and the print ads. And I put some of those out there today, and I'll refer to that time and again. You'll see that little code. That little code is used often. But the other piece that we started to tie together was, we call it featured listings. And if you go to our trade website and you do a search for a Cat D11, for example, which is a gigantic dozer, costs more than a house. To get at the top of that search engine, you have to have it featured in the magazine. And we're starting to see huge correlations between this, that those items are selling faster, they're getting more traction. And so at this point, we don't see us backing off on this print side. We see them working hand in hand together. And I do think the difference between what we're doing versus, say, like the Omaha World Herald or the Lincoln Journal Star is, when you're a person who's buying one of these big dozers, you may know what the Cat D11 is, but you may not know what John Deere's version of it is. You may not know what Komatsu is. You may not know what Hitachi's is. But if you saw the Hitachi and you saw it was $200,000 less and it could do the same job, might have your attention. And that is what this is. It's the power of suggestion as you're doing homework and making these kind of purchases. So we've gotten into several other things, financing parts, service specials, in how this drives buyers online. It's quite amazing to me to see that part of it. The other piece that we got into around that time was web hosting. And we now host over 9,000 different dealer websites for companies in our industries around the world. And the reason why is just to manage their own inventory. And we've actually ended up creating a command center for that for them. So what seems like this very simple concept on the surface, it gets extremely complex as you peel back the onion. And you have to become an expert on the digital side completely in our company. And it never stops evolving, never. Any questions on that? Yes, I'm being so thorough about that. That's great. So, yeah.
One thing about our print that Chuck is saying, when Jennifer came out originally to tour Sandhills about 6 months ago, I found out at that time, we have over 58,000 locations in the United States that we put these magazines right now. Over 58,000 places. Truck stops, where else would they be? Implement stores, wherever.
Again, and I'm from a small town, probably the most effective distribution points we have. In the truck market, it's definitely truck stops. But in like the ag industry, for sure, if you go to any small town across, and it's not just Nebraska, I mean, it's very similar all across the world. There's one gas station in that town. In that gas station, you're gonna find our magazines. And the other key is that they're free. The buyer does not have to pay for them. And that is a fundamental piece of it that we learned, that buyers don't want to pay $5 for a magazine. They sure will pick one up when it's free. And this is just outlining a little bit of the featured listing piece of it. So you can see that one is at the top of our search engine there. The other cool thing about this, I'll take this all the way back to Google, is if you typed into Google, search a Volvo A25G for sale, you type that in, the first thing you're gonna see is the link to Machinery Trader. And when you click that link to Machinery Trader, it does not take you to the home page of Machinery Trader. It takes you to that screen right here, these listings. And that is part of the magic of that piece of it. It ties all the way back into our fundamental organic SEO strategy. And because we were first, and because our changing content is so dynamic, it doesn't matter whether I'm in Brisbane, Australia, whether I'm in Manchester, England, or whether I'm in Oklahoma. If you do that search, Machinery Trader is going to be one of the first two things you see. Yes?
So you started out with big equipment, but I've noticed that now did you kind of work into the maintenance kind of products like filters and oil that goes into those products?
For sure. And what we're finding is every day they're selling things to people they wouldn't have sold to before, because it's 8 o'clock at night, the dealership is closed, but I need a filter for my truck. And I need it, I'm busy, I'm on the road, and you need you to ship it to me. Well, now we have all those digital tools built in as offerings, and many of our customers are taking advantage of that. That's a great question. And I pop here, this is our digital command center, it's a Sandhills cloud. There isn't an hour of any day that I'm not in this part of our system. Whether you're on a phone, whether you're on a laptop, whatever the case, it all starts with that inventory app. And every one of our customers now, to update that inventory on our website, they can just go in there at any time, real time change it. I sold this one, I need to change the price for that one. I need to update the hours on this one, things of that nature. Well, what's key is, since most times we also host their website, it's updating their own website at the same time. They're not having to update multiple different entities to get these things done. And the efficiencies we're building into that now are even going so far as we host the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer's website as well for used equipment. And it'll also update that automatically. And we continue to build those types of efficiencies into part of the system. So I'm gonna point out these two here, the call stats tool and the web stats tool. They're two of our most important return on investment tracking tools we have for customers. And I'm gonna use the call statistics tool as the one that I'm using the most, because we're all about driving phone calls for the inventory for sale for our customers. And I stole this slide from one of my colleagues who was demonstrating the difference you get by having a full page ad in the magazine versus a quarter page, and the amount of phone calls we generate on here. And you can see the customer who's got 40 featured listings, which is what you would see in the magazine, they're getting substantially more calls, 1,606 calls versus 391 calls for a smaller ad that's not featuring as much equipment. This is the type of thing that gives you tremendous confidence when you're talking to your customers. When you're working with them, and again, when you're selling such big equipment, every one of these leads could be a $50,000 profit, a $100,000 profit. You can't afford not to get those calls when those buyers are in the market. And that is this is one of the most important tools that we picked up in the last 10 years. It's, again, contributed to the growth of the company, because not only does it impact the customer's belief, it impacted my belief. It impacts every new representative's belief when they start to see this sort of thing happen, and their customers' reaction to it isn't whether or not they're going to keep doing business with you, it's just at what level and how can we get better for it. And so it's a powerful tool for us. This can go in a lot more detail. We can boil this down all the way down to the phone number that called you. A lot of times that phone number matches up on our system. And there have been times this year during COVID that I saw things happen, and as I was checking the stats, I knew instantly what it meant. I could even compare it to major articles going on in the Wall Street Journal. And I'll talk a little bit about the gold market today. There are things I couldn't believe it as I saw it happen. And that was all back in March of this year. This product's probably the most near and dear to my heart in the company because of my background. When I first started in 1995, 1996, 1997, we were providing that data through that network, and the customers are downloading auction data and for sale data. That's really kind of the seedlings for what became Fleet Evaluator. And what you're seeing here, for all intents and purposes, to simplify it, it would be like looking at a blue book value for your car. This is what's actually happening in the market for that big equipment, for those trucks. And you can see what they're selling for at auction, and you can see so what they saw right away was that used sleeper truck inventory dropped by 30% year over year. Now, when those inventory levels drop, the ones that are there, their values could do what? They go up, and they are going up. Now, I referenced early in the conversation, I was dealing with customers who were really struggling selling these sleeper trucks earlier this year, and was on 2 different calls where they were about to tear these trucks up and make them into day cabs and take the sleeper off of them and lose money on them because they couldn't sell them. And what was happening was, during COVID, people were putting off the expense of replacing those sleeper trucks. That's what they're doing. Those sleeper trucks are still going up and down the road. We could see that going on. But the people who buy them, they were trying to hold off and hold their cash. And time and again, I told these guys, just calm down. I go, at some point, this has got to turn. Do not make that kind of mistake. And every one of them agreed with me. It's almost like they just needed to hear me say it. Sure enough, we've seen a hit, and it's hit hard the last 30 days. And these customers now, they're selling trucks because they got to be replaced. Otherwise, they're going to have to fix those trucks, and that gets expensive. And so we're seeing that happen. There's 2 other major trends going on right now. The 175 horsepower tractor, very expensive, large ag tractors going on out there. We are seeing a gradual increase there, about 4% versus the same time a year ago. And 4% when you're talking about a $300,000 tractor is real money. And that is definitely happening right now. And I've even seen some of these that are selling globally that I've never seen them move quite as fast. And when I saw this, I went, okay, that makes sense. They can't get their hands on it. That's what's going on. The construction market's a little different. There's an increase in excavator inventory that's 0 to 5 years old. And that's a little bit of an alarm. to see that piece up there. It's definitely pulling down the prices in that market category, and we'll be watching that one very closely. But this is information that the data scientists are pulling out of the Fleet Evaluator program. They're watching these types of processes and things of that nature that are going on in the marketplace. And when they bring it out to us, there hasn't been a time where I go, that makes sense. You know, every one of them, what I'm hearing in the marketplace, that makes sense. And it's powerful information to share with our customers, and not something we charge them for. You know, it's like we're partnered with them, and it's going a long, long way on that piece of it. Any questions on this? Yes, Tammy.
Quick question. So we talked this morning, we were talking about the tariffs on steel and that sort of thing. Did you see the impact of tariffs in your sales data as well on used equipment versus new versus?
Not as much yet, but we're definitely watching that. I have seen it have some impact on trade, actually specifically from Canada, coming down in the United States. And it's not impacting all of them, but certainly if it's a certain percentage of that, say, truck has components that came from China, even though they assembled it in Canada, I think it's something like 65 or 70% of that, if it came from China, it's got a huge tariff on it. And they aren't making it into the States. Those deals are coming to it. They're just shutting down because once they realize what the tariff is, it's not happening. But on the contrary, most of them didn't have to deal with that. And so we're still seeing quite a bit of that going back and forth in that border issue at this point. There are some things happening in Australia with this right now though too, and I'm seeing a trend of isolationism down there where they're preparing for a longer haul. I think it's going to be quite some time before I'm back in Australia at this point. Any other questions on this? Jim?
I know you're kind of talking about this nationally. Can you, through our data, go down state by state and, or region, or, can you tell can we tell where things are happening?
Yeah, you can.
Like all the way, what's the smallest we can go?
Yeah, I think the best example I can give you, and I would say it's more regional, you know, and a great example of this is right now, if you bought the same John Deere combine, everything about this combine is the same, and it's $250,000 in South Dakota and Nebraska, but you could buy that same John Deere combine in Idaho or Oregon for $200,000. It's the same thing. And that's the type of trend that we're able to catch on to. Now, you have to be skilled at getting that combine moved from Oregon or Idaho to Nebraska or South Dakota if you're gonna do a deal like that. But it's being done every day. And the savviest of our customers are recognizing that, and they're using the data accordingly. So yeah, that's a really cool piece that, you know, when you're in the trade, you know it. And we even have another product on the digital side that helps find the cheapest way to transport that equipment from point A to point B. It's called FreightStar, and certainly will be a huge growing part of our organization. There's no chance it's not going to go through the roof, because every deal depends on it. Any other questions? I'm going to take a step back to March of this year. I'm in Las Vegas for a huge construction convention, not taking COVID nearly as serious as I probably should have been. You know, and I don't think really most of the people I knew weren't taking it that serious then. And I'm at a hospitality on a Wednesday night out there with some customers, and I start getting the text messages. The NCAA tournament's been called off. NBA just called off the season. And I'm starting to wonder what I'm doing in Las Vegas. And unfortunately, I was able to go home within, I think, about 24 hours after getting all that info. But my mind now is racing because I know, we could be potentially facing a shutdown. I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm very focused on markets outside of the United States. It's my role in the company. And I'm waking up to this happening, to the US dollar. The world retreated to the US dollar in March. And my team is in a bit of a panic. My Canadian team is definitely panicking because they're wondering what's going to happen. And I'm having to take a real step back. and go, okay, how can we take advantage? There has to be an opportunity here. And that's what I dedicated myself to. And now my team's all being sent home now for the first time. And one advantage I had to working with our offices internationally, and I'll come back around to this a little bit later, I was pretty well used to operating video conferencing. And what I found works in a video conference, Ashley, is to be right in your face. Just you and me. What do you got going today? What are you working on? Here's what I'm seeing. And my team adapted pretty quickly to that they better be prepared. And they knew I was gonna be calling between 7 and 7:30 every morning. And I'm a big believer in the 1-minute manager technique. I don't like to micromanage, but I like to make sure we're in the ballpark, and I like to know what you're working on. And a lot of times I can help you if I know that. But after talking to the team, what we found out the Canadians wanted to do, the Canadians wanted to sell in the United States. And I heard it within my first 3 or 4 calls. It was consistent. And I took that step back. I said, we can make a go of this in a big way. We can grow this in Canada right now. And I hate to do this because I'm not that great with the cool techniques of showing these one line at a time. But I wanted to share my strategy for you that we really put together in about 2 days for the Canadian piece. I decided to focus on the smaller opportunities in Canada. In that magazine, I had it open to those pages there, and everybody sees that. These pages here, these are people who have one for sale. A farmer, for example, a contractor, a trucking company, and whatnot. We focused on this. And what we found out by talking to them is, guess what? Trucks were still going up and down the road. We're talking to them. How are you doing? It's kind of crazy right now, eh? But, the trucks are rolling up and down the road, eh? We got to get the toilet paper delivered. And you start to hear this from these guys. And then you're talking to the farmers. They're nervous, but were they not going to plant? No, they were still planting. Every one of them was still planting. And again, growing up on a farm, I knew I would have still been planting. I knew it for sure. The construction projects I wasn't so sure about. I thought maybe they'd be all shut down. It was possible. I don't know. And again, in different cultures, and as you work with these different countries, in they have a different culture up there. And I thought it was possible they might be shutting down. They didn't. They didn't shut down anything, as it would turn out. But again, we're talking to the people on the ground. And where I really credit the team I'm working with is that they humbled themselves to go out and work with the granular level. A lot of people wouldn't do that instantly, but they all bought into what I was talking about. We have to go out and talk to the end users. Let's find out what's happening. Let's sell these little ads while we go. And let's see what happens. Well, sure enough, what you get from that after talking to them is when they actually sell something. And we were seeing time and again, a truck was selling in a week. A tractor was selling in 3 weeks. Things that don't happen that fast. Usually it takes about 8 to 12 weeks to get these done. Time and time and time again. These little success stories started to build up. And guess what happened to my team's confidence? It went up. They stopped panicking. And it really brought together some cool things. The other thing we started to see finance deals happen. We could see the markets were still in motion. And so every morning, this video conference call I'm having with them started to become really a fun exercise. It really did. And I said this time and time again, I go, we have to stay in the face of the market. We're not going to be able to travel to see our customers anymore, at least not right now. So, Canada's still not letting us in. They think we're a cesspool down here, and that is what they think of us. And I hear it all the time when I talk about, how you doing? You're marinating in it down there. You're going to survive. I'm okay, hanging in here. But I kept saying it. I said, more calls, more emails, more text messages. I said, we're going to stay in their face. We're going to be the buoy for them. And sure enough, we grew from it. And it's really been, it's easily been the most rewarding year of my career out here to see what's happened. And we did the same thing in Australia, and I work and head up our Australia division in a group of people that were completely panicked when it started. In the Australia culture and how they've handled COVID, I don't know how much of you pay attention to it. They shut it down. I mean, Victoria's still shut down. And they don't go out of the house. They're terrified to leave the house. And to keep them engaged, to keep them understanding that all of these things were still moving. And believe it or not, I just started BCCing the Australian team on everything I was doing with the Canadian team. And they started seeing that the Canadian team was having success. And they started to think, oh yeah, you know, Canada and Australia are all part of the Commonwealth, right? You know, one big family with the UK, right? They're all happy. It was working. And so really, it's been, again, a very rewarding year. And that strategy that you see there, that was what saw us through. And we're still really hammering on it today. Very much a piece that we're hammering on today. I thought it would be cool to share these. There's actually two stories here in these three pictures that also happened about the same time. That Komatsu machine at the end in Alberta is $500,000. Now for everyone to know, $500,000 machines do not sell quickly. It is a process for the company when they identify that one of these machines is on the market, that they can use it. And then there's usually a long negotiation, you know, because we're talking about $500,000 there. That machine sold in 2 weeks, and it sold to a gold mine in Alaska. And I knew it because of that call tracking program. And we called them and I asked them, I go, did you sell that to a gold mine in Alaska? Yes, we did. I go, did you sell it through the magazine, through the website? Where did you hear about it? He goes, they definitely saw it in the magazine. Because when I talked to the guy, he said, I'm looking at it in the magazine. Now, that very day, I had seen an article that Warren Buffett was getting involved in Barrick Gold, was the name of the company. And it was it made news because Buffett had famously before said he would never buy gold. It was not a good investment. And I recognized then that the construction market was about to take off. And the big machines were about to start moving because gold's gonna go up, and those gold mines, it's a lot of work. And you know, I had so much fun with this because, you know, there's a TV show, the Gold Rush TV show. Well, that's global. I mean, there's Gold Rush TV shows all over the planet like that. So I started using snippet pictures of that with the team and sending that out to them. And I just started calling it, and every day the email I send out to start the day is called Canada Gold, Australia Gold, and Latin America Gold. And that's the subject line. And we share these stories that are going on. That was the first of those stories right there. And that was in late March, early April this year. So my confidence continued to grow that things were moving. This particular one, this NC Equipment, also in Alberta, these two scrapers is a $500,000 deal. They only had them out there for a week, and I saw the guy who called them. I knew the guy. I saw it, and I called the guy who had called them, and I said, "Did you buy those?" He says, "Yep." I go, "Where are they going?" He goes, "Gold mine." I said, "Really? What are they going to use them for?" They got to build roads inside the gold mine. I said, "You're kidding me." He goes, "No." He goes, "Well, I'm not going to tell you where though, Chuck." And I go, "That's fine. I go, that's enough information for me." That happened recently in the last 3 weeks. And this company, NC Equipment, had never done business with us before and was always doing business with our biggest competitor. They're actually located in our biggest competitor's backyard. Now, our biggest competitor, if they would have sold those machines for $500,000, would have charged them $50,000 to sell them. Guess what we charged? Somebody guess.
25.
No, and it's a lot lower. It's a lot lower, $400. Because they just took out 2 little ads in this magazine. And they got featured on our website, and that particular lead came from the website. I know it for a fact, because the guy who bought them said, yeah, came across the Machinery Trader Alert.
So you don't take a cut of the sale?
No, we don't.
Oh my.
No, we don't. We charge a flat fee. We charge it up front. Whether it sells or not, we get paid. But it's a far, far smaller amount. And our biggest competitor takes at least 10% and oftentimes more than that. Now, on something this big, it would have been in the 10% range. It would not have been more. But what I know for a fact that's who they've been using. And now I know they'll never use them again because $50,000 is real money.
Why aren't you in Russia?
Say that again.
I said, why aren't you in Russia?
Why aren't we in Russia?
Well, I mean, they're all
Sure.
big equipment they have.
Yeah,
lines, they have all
if you
that.
go to the Treasury site, they frown on us doing business with Russia. And there's still sanctions against that in the Ukraine until they get that identified. I will tell you that there are companies that do business in Russia that are not located in Russia that pull equipment out of there and sell it to our products, but they're usually based in a place like Switzerland or Germany, something like that. But there are people who specialize in that import-export market. this is a great segue into where I'm going next, by the way, because,
You're
no,
welcome.
no, it's perfect. It's not one I would have, it's not the story I would have chose, but it's true. And as we went to global expansion, I started to realize it more and more on how our niche was. But I thought this was a neat story just to share things that really are happening, things we're experiencing, and, you know, and why I'm so bullish about our company going into the future, because in so many ways, I feel like we're really just getting started on some of the things that we can do. Talking about global expansion, so it's 2002. We had a young man who's doing an internship from France here, and Tom P., the owner of the company, calls me into his office, says, I want you to meet this young man and see if maybe he'll work with us doing what you used to do over in Europe. And I said, okay. I get to know the guy. He does not speak very good English. He can't seem to say the name Chuck. He keeps thinking my name is Jacques. And, I don't have that nickname for Charles in France, but we did get that one ironed out. And that was where we began. And we started out by really focusing just on companies who are experts at the import-export market for this big equipment, like this Komatsu equipment and that Caterpillar equipment you just saw before. They're experts in that, and that's going around the globe. I would soon find that the Dutch traders are very, very good at this. And some of the coolest experiences I've had is when I go into an office who does the same thing that our customers here do, but when you go into a Dutch office, their TV screens are all very focused on currencies in every country, and they're watching it, and they're watching it. And they have their way of always finding where they can make another 10% like that. And it's fascinating, because every one of them does it. Every one of them is doing it, and they just completely look at the market differently, and they do not make mistakes. It's amazing to me. And they are the first ones gravitating to that fleet evaluator program, but they want to see what's happening in the US. That's what they want to watch the most. So anyway, though, we started expanding in Europe. We started out in Luxembourg. When we moved to Manchester, UK, we've got an office in Madrid, and office in Italy, office in Germany. You kind of see those spots over there. When that started, I had a great full head of hair. Really, that was what I liked about myself the most back then. I do not have as much hair. I'm a little taller than most of you folks, and if you saw what was going on here, it's not so good. I would have to tell you that the cultural differences between the people is so hard for someone from the Midwest, like myself with my background, to have understood intuitively, and it has been the challenge of my lifetime, working with socialist cultures in general, and just how the people approach the day differently. And I don't want to go into it too far, but if I didn't mention it to you today, I wouldn't be doing this story justice on how challenging it has been and where we're at today versus where we were at then. The one thing that was the consistency piece, our products worked exactly the same. They were just as successful. And someone who I just saved $50,000 for would sit and argue with me till the cows came home that I was charging them $400. And it's really something. It's really something. But through course and time, we have found the right people. It just took time. A lot more time than I thought it would. And it took some acquisitions and some people that are a little bit more like-minded in finding out that this philosophy worked and plugging in our tools on the back end. But it's really doing quite well in Europe now. Somewhere around that time, we started down in Brisbane, Australia. Much less cultural differences. Far more pro-American culture, for that matter, too, which has helped. It's helped. I never had any real backlash from that part of it. And I'm still working with that team today. And it's kind of one of my side jobs that I do at night, because when it's 7 o'clock at night here, it's early morning for them. So I get lots of text messages and calls. So my kids love it, because when they call at the dinner table, we just put it on the speakerphone and they get to hear people talking in Australian. So that's a lot of fun. Any questions, though, about global expansion, just in general?
Are you looking in South America at all?
We do, and we have a publication in South America, and I run that publication right now. It is far more Mexico focused than the rest of the continent down there, but the companies that are really active in that really big equipment market, we target them quite closely. We run all of that out here out of Lincoln. Same time zone, which is the biggest challenge of all of this has been the time zones. And when I look back at the European side, it was the waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to deal with. And you didn't have a chance to even brush your teeth. You were dealing with serious issues, serious personnel issues, you know, and challenging things that you didn't know the answers to, but you had to get them solved and you had to get people out of bed. It has been great to have really solid leaders on the ground in Europe now that, you know, Sandhills just doesn't sleep anymore. And we talk about that, it truly doesn't. But yeah, the great thing about the Latin America product is we're on the same time zone. It's
Yeah.
actually the central time zone down there, most of it is.
For a
So,
lot of it, yeah.
yeah.
I just, last time I was in Argentina, just the amount of construction and big equipment was just amazing.
It is amazing. It truly is. And it's that is a side that we have to be extremely, it's like we're rifle shooters down there. We have to identify those people. On the digital side also, you know, as you can imagine with all the registrations and you can monitor traffic and things of that nature, at least 2 hours a week, I'm granularly going through each and every person that's a new registrant or used our online auctions that's from that part of the world, and we contact them. Did you find what you needed? You know, is there anything we can do to help you? I'm not even trying to sell them anything out of the gates. I just want to make sure they're having a quality experience with us. And sure enough, once we get that conversation going, you find out that they've got some big machine. It's not selling there in Argentina right now, but it might be selling right here in Australia. And when you get into the gold mines and things of that nature, there's 2 places in the world we're seeing that happen right now, is here in South Africa. The South African product, when we got that launched, that was also extremely challenging. Totally different culture, Africa being a totally different animal, but huge, huge equipment flowing in and out of there all the time. Any other questions about global expansion?
How do you how do you choose these different places where you're setting up your digital offices? I'm just curious how you choose where you're gonna put these offices. I don't know. That's all I got.
No, I think it's a fair question. I'd love to tell you that we had all these great strategic plans for that, but the reality is that initially we tried to be in every country in Europe, at least the major 5. And what we're finding is that one of the magical things about this, and I'm gonna go a bit contrarian on you folks on the video conferencing thing, centralizing as much of it in one place in Europe has been better than having smaller offices in each country, is what we've learned. And you know, we look at how we do it here in the States, there's a reason that not all of our sales reps live out all over the country, and it's because together there's an amazing amount of tribal knowledge that we share. And when we recognize something that's working, it spreads quickly inside the organization. But the other side of that has been accountability. And unless you're very good with video conferencing software, I mean very, very good, it is very difficult to keep people accountable. And what we found in Europe is that we're centralizing more in Manchester, UK, where there's not as much cultural differences. There still are some, but it's not as significant. And we're finding in a place like Manchester is a very dynamic city. It's like the next London in the UK. There was all these people from all over Europe, all the language barriers we were dealing with, and language barrier is a huge thing. You know, and as much as I've argued with different people in the company, for me that was dealing with those people every day. I would say something and they thought I said something else. And you thought they were speaking perfect English and they're really not. You know, and it was a challenge. So, you know, in the end, we're big fans of that centralization wherever we can, but we made a lot of mistakes with choosing locations. And when you go over there, you know, I mean, people in Spain, they're completely different than people in France, you know, and people in France are completely different than the people in Germany. And it doesn't take you long to realize why those countries were always at war with each other. At all. I mean, yeah, I'll leave it at that.